And we're back. We're here with Emily, Colin, and Jefferson. We're breaking down the debate for you. All 3 hours.
All 3 hours of it. You and I talked ahead of time where we saw on the schedule that it was 3 hours, and we both said, surely that can't be true. Surely it's an hour and a half, 2 hours, and there's some spin time on either side.
Yeah.
But no, the spin time was on top of the 3 hours.
Yeah, right? I'm still recovering from the climate town halls last week. I was at an event, and Colin texted me like, no, it's really 3 hours. And I knew I wasn't starting until late. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I have it in me. I had nightmares all night after watching this.
Really? What
Like
did you finish?
every anxiety dream that one could have. I couldn't open my high school locker.
I'm so glad you care so much. I am. There needs to be an Emily Gilliland in the world. There need to be Emily Gillilands who care so much. What was causing you such anxiety?
It wasn't that different. I feel like one of the things that got to me were the repeated laugh lines. So at some point in the debate or a town hall or something, each candidate has found a line that works for them, and now they just keep repeating it. So Amy Klobuchar thinks she's God, and that she's on day 1 going to do this, on day 2 that, blah, blah, blah. On day 7, one would tell you to rest, but I'm going to keep working. Like, come on, Amy.
It's a zinger.
Move on.
It's a zinger.
I wrote the damn bill from Sanders. Now
I read the damn bill.
Exactly. These applause lines need to move on.
Instead of maybe we can, yes we can, or whatever the heck that Kamala Harris said.
That was my favorite because she meant it as a zinger, and then the moderators were like, "Okay, that's your whole time. We're moving on." And that's all she got in.
And it's a sign. I'm not saying it's a bad sign, but it tells us something when the person laughing loudest and longest is the person that said the zinger.
So,
okay, to me, the biggest challenge Kamala had was that she laughed the most at the things that she said.
And kept going, yeah. Jefferson, I have a question for you, because this is now that I've been following these candidates closely, I keep hearing them use the same stories and so I am guessing that's sort of campaign expertise. You've got your thing.
You got your best material.
And you just got to keep repeating.
Your best material.
But for me, as someone who has been watching all of these, and I was at a campaign kickoff last night, the person did the same thing. I've seen them multiple times. They tell the same story to sort of demonstrate the why of their candidacy. That's just the way folks are told to do it, huh?
I'm going to say, I'm going to step in the shoes of expert of all things campaign. I think there's at least 2 things that go on. One is it's hard to come up with new material every time. So some of it's an easier thing to do. I was watching Julian Castro, who had said during the debate in his back and forth, in the sort of big back and forth with Biden about immigration policy. And he said, well, I don't want to, there's no comparison between Barack Obama and Donald Trump in immigration policy. Donald Trump has a dark heart when it comes to, And then there's the post-interview where you think now we're going to get the unvarnished impression. And they ask a question. He says, well, I don't think there's any way to compare Donald Trump and Barack Obama comes to immigration policy. Donald Trump has a dark heart when it comes to immigration policy. So why? Because his best material, that's what he's got ready. And it's hard to do more. But there is this thing, anybody who's watched a comedy show, right? I remember watching a movie. This was really helpful. All right, I met Jesse Jackson when I was a kid. It was not in the locker room. I introduced him at my high school, Grant High School, which is now beautifully remodeled. I'm so proud of it. And he came. I was student body president of my high school, so I got to introduce him. It was a highlight of my life. One of the highlights of a highlight of my life.
I was like, wow.
Highlight. No, it was like a high moment, high moment. Mm-hmm. And I never seen anybody do anything like Jesse Jackson did, right? I mean, I had yay-hoo friends in high school, and he was able to enthrall 100% of the people in the room for 100% of the time he was talking. I'd never seen anything like it. Mm-hmm. And I asked one of his entourage. I said, "How does he do that?" He says, "You got to understand. He's got material. He's got pieces of thing. He knows that up with hope, down with dope is going to work. He knows I am somebody is going to work. And so each time he uses some of his best stuff, and then he stitches within it stuff that's relevant to Grant High School, relevant to Portland, Oregon, relevant to whatever year and day that was. But each time he knows some of his best material is going to hit. I then watched a movie called Comedian with Jerry Seinfeld and a comedian whose name I always forget. And I've told this story before. I've used this to help people understand the development of material. In fact, I got another story to tell. Wow, I got lots of stuff this morning. You have to cut me off at some point, Emily. And it follows them around. Jerry Seinfeld, after he's wrapped the Seinfeld TV show, and this other guy who's supposed to be an up-and-coming comic, and you watch their process. And their process is they write stuff. And they go to a small club, and if people laugh, they keep it. If people laugh only a little bit, then they tinker with it. If people kind of bombs, they either tinker with it or dump it entirely. And they do another small club. And they keep doing that until they get to their HBO special. And they use all their best stuff. Well, if you've got a national debate in front of millions of people, this is your HBO special. You got to use all your best stuff. So I don't know if this is what they tell politicians to do. It's the same thing Jesse Jackson was doing in my high school. It's as a civil rights leader. It's the same thing that Jerry Seinfeld was doing as a comedian, right? I think it's just the development of material. And I'll give another example. My uncle, who I love dearly, who started a very successful company and has given over 5,000 speeches. He lived his life essentially as a trainer, started a company that ended up being Franklin Covey. You've heard of the Covey because he wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he's written a few books that have sold a lot of copies, et cetera, et cetera. And he developed, and he bequeathed to me his IP book, We Have a Close Relationship, and his IP book, which is his instant preparation book, which is 150 pages of his favorite poems, favorite quotes, favorite pieces of scripture that he developed over 45 years of giving speeches, etc. And if he had his biggest thing, he would use his best stuff. So I don't fault that. But so what I look for is layering. What I look for is somebody who will give us their best stuff and will demonstrate depth. Will demonstrate. So when Kamala Harris effectively whacked Biden, I think one of the first times the three of us did this. Mm-hmm. But then the next time, but then the next debate didn't seem to have a big follow-up. I said, okay, that was a canned line that somebody wrote for her that she nailed, and she nailed it. But then she didn't have as much depth in future debates that I saw in able to sort of
and
have
if she would have used the same line in the second debate or the climate or whatever, then that would have, to me, fallen flat.
It would have been spent.
She spent it, right?
So what I look for is depth, and I think when I say layering, what I mean is like the Matrix. So the Matrix used not only katana swords but also heavy metal music, and also more characters of color than like any major blockbuster by that time. Okay, it had something for lots of different subcultures. What I look for also is somebody's ability to communicate in a way that's going to reach Emily Gilliland, the person who's been watching all of the debates, who is staying up late at night because she's anxious because the fate of the country is at stake, and there's something new for you. And I want a candidate who's going to be able to give you something new, not only their best stuff, but also some new stuff. And then also I don't fault them if they can do that, for also reaching, my brother-in-law, who will watch the third debate, might have missed the second debate, or might only hear a few clips afterwards on the radio or on YouTube. So those are some of the things I look for.
I think what was hard for me was that I think sort of being in a similar bucket as you, Emily, having watched most of this, they've had, 2 months since the last debate. So, kind of the biggest gap since the first debate. And those two sort of came fast on the heels of each other. And it didn't feel like there was any of that layering, right? Or very little of it. Like, it was a lot of the same stuff we heard 2 months ago.
I would put Warren as an exception.
That's fair. And it was interesting because she had like some of the least speaking time that she has yet had. She was lowest down on the list. And I think moving from sort of being in the prior debates always one of the two top candidates, and now sort of moving sort of a little bit lower.
And I think Warren has a formula, but not a script. So her answers have the same cadence, the same sort of outline of, I hear your question, but
that's why she's the best one.
Let me take you to 30,000 view, and then let's get tactical. And so her formula is the same, but her script is not. Others, who I think are less experienced, have the same script. And though I understand you need to repeat something 3 times or whatever for someone to understand it, I don't think that they show the depth. So Pete also has a formula, And if he could follow it up in the same way that Warren does with tactics, I think he would be more compelling. So he's now on this lane of we're all similar, but let me tell. But the difference is how we're going to get it done. But he has not been compelling, and now he's going to get it done. So he is now almost like the philosopher in the corner telling you what's happening, but he's not, I don't think, been able to pivot to how he is going to do things as president.
I have feelings about that. I also think, so we have Warren talking about trade policy, which I think is a good example of what you're talking about, and her ability to sort of take sort of consistent theory and pivot to specific issues.
So our trade policy in America has been broken for decades, and it has been broken because it works for giant multinational corporations and not for much of anyone else. These are giant corporations that, shoot, if they can save a nickel by moving a job to a foreign country, they'll do it in a heartbeat. And yet, for decades now, who's been whispering in the ears of our trade negotiators? Who has shaped our trade policy? It's been the giant corporations. It's been their lobbyists and their executives. The way we change our trade policy in America is first, the procedures. Who sits at the table? I want to negotiate trade with unions at the table. I want to negotiate it with small farmers at the table. I want to negotiate it with environmentalists at the table. I want to negotiate with human rights activists at the table. And you asked the question about leverage. If I can just respond to that one. The leverage? Are you kidding? Everybody wants access to the American market. That means that we have the capacity to say right here in America, you want to come sell goods to American consumers, then you've got to raise your standards. You've got to raise your labor standards, and you've got to raise your environmental standards so our companies can compete on a level playing field.
And so you have this very consistent formula, right? A theory of change functionally, where multinational corporations that are entirely self-interested are the source of the problem. This leaves out everyday people. The solution is to engage everyday people, and particularly sort of core constituents within the Democratic Party in the process. And the end policy is sort of a reformed capitalism that shares prosperity more widely. And I think you highlighted that really well.
And the zinger is corruption.
Right.
So if you get lost in all of the academic formula that she has presented us, then she brings you back with, and it's all about, at the end of the day, corruption. And we're going to address that day one in this way so that you can be at the table. We're going to address systemic barriers that are impeding people being able to participate.
And I think on Pete, Mayor Pete,
Pete.
You talk about him as that sort of philosopher in the corner that's describing sort of what's happening. And I think that's spot on. And I feel like part of that is because he's just, like, from an experience level, not at the same level as the other candidates, right? He is really removed.
Well, he
is
just
a
finished
small
high
town
school,
mayor.
to be fair. He's very smart, but he just finished high school.
And he's a small town
He
mayor.
got a lot of college credits in high school. I mean, like, he's like matriculated through
AP
community
classes,
college, right? He's
AP classes.
Yeah, no, he really did well. Right, Mr. Cromley thought he was the best social studies student he's had in 2 decades. But you gotta give him a break a little bit.
He seemed to be a little on his heels last night. He even, like, when the camera came to him, he just looked like he wasn't. He was just a little.
I found out my beef. I found out my problem with Buttigieg.
Ooh, excellent. Please.
I
share
finally
us.
found it out. So I will
Too
say
much hair
again,
gel?
I don't know what other people. I try to be relatively humble with what other people will think about somebody. Like, if like, well, I don't think that's going to play in this part of the country or with that kind of person. Or I don't know. I know what plays with me, right? Yeah. I know what sounds real to me, what sounds authentic to me, what sounds human to me, what sounds smart to me, what makes sense to me, and what doesn't make sense to me. And Buddha and the candidates that I consistently learn from, who come up with turns of phrase that are compelling to me, that are ways of formulating thoughts that didn't seem obvious and yet seem compelling, are Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg. They seem to be the best communicators, smartest people in the race for me, just for me. But I haven't. And I was wondering, is the reason I'm not all in on Buttigieg is it because of policy reasons? Is it because I'm not prepared to have a recent high school graduate as president of the United States? And I think it's because I don't think he has black friends. I think that's my beef with Buttigieg. I think he's hung out with a bunch. I mean, this might not be fair, but Jules Bailey held a party for him. And that's Jules' thing, too. He didn't have no black friends. Like, he went to Lincoln, right? And so it's like to just see the way that somebody, like, and I know it's weird. It doesn't mean that somebody's a racist. Somebody's not even black friends. You can still be a racist. That's not what I mean. But just like, have you grown up? Like, what has been your bandwidth of friends? Now, I'm sure friends of Pete Buttigieg are going to come back and be, so, hey, you served. And if you served, you work with a diverse array of people. I don't know. That's just my sense. My sense is that his group of friends was somewhat monotheistic. That's just my sense.
And I that resonates with me to some extent. I think you saw him get one of the flattest responses from the audience at a historically black college. Like, I think you do see that in the polling. You see that in how he talks about it.
That's why, because he's from this historic black college, and it didn't. I was like, oh wait, no, it's not. It's not. It's not working. He hasn't done this, but this is not his room. This is not his room. His room is South Bend, Indiana.
Right. In a way that, like, it was Beto's room. It was Biden's room, and frequently Warren's room, Booker's room. Right. Like, Warren did well, but right. Like,
I love it when I'm not the host because I don't have to be as responsible.
For me, one of the, in addition to what I said about his content, is I find him, and I'm at a place where now I'm not only analyzing the words that they use, because my brain works like if someone repeats a word more than once, we're not talking like "and" or "the," but like Kamala Harris says babies a lot. And so my brain works in a way that I start to count how many times they use the same word, because I feel like that's out of nervousness that they've gotten stuck. But I'm also really observing body language. And I think, and I just sort of jokingly said, do you not like Pete because he has too much hair gel? He is very stiff. And I've met both Pete and Corey.
That might
now.
be what I'm talking about. He doesn't listen to a lot of jazz. He doesn't.
He needs more jazz in his life.
He can utter nary an NWA note.
I've met both of them now because they've both come to Portland. I feel really lucky to have done so, to have met Corey and to have met Senator Booker and to have met Mayor Pete Buttigieg. And Pete was very stiff. So he's like, sort of like extends his hand in a very stiff way and he shakes it and says, well, where are you from? And it just felt very stiff. Like I didn't feel like he saw me or heard me or cared.
You say tomato, I say tomato, same difference.
But when I met Cory Booker, I have loved Cory Booker for a long time because I find him very inspiring. And I'm not saying he's necessarily my pick, but he gets me. I am excited about him. When I watched his announcement video, I had chills. I had emotion. He's inspiring. And so when I met him, I was like, I'm such a fan. I don't know what to say. And he said, can I give you a hug? And he was
Cory Booker definitely had a black friend.
And I was like,
probably a bunch of them.
And he was just a nice guy. He's like, let's take a picture. Who are you? What are you about? And like in a way that he's never, I don't feel like I changed his life or any way, but he changed mine. And that was an instant interaction. And is he the best president? I don't know, but those things matter to me. How you connect with people, how you listen, because these folks have to listen in communities, small, medium, and large, across differences, across similarities, across the multitude of identities each of us bring to this conversation, and they're night and day. Yeah.
Go ahead, Colin, make your point, and then I want to tease. They want us to do a break, but I still need to give the answers. But I'll do it when Colin tells me.
No, I think that's perfect. Let's take a break now, and then we'll hear who the winner is after the break.
Because I have
that is perfect.
Answer.